All right, this is the Voice of Motown podcast. I'm Tyler Pepe.
And I'm Braden Cork, and this is the WVU Sports Podcast by two suffering WVU fans.
All right, guys. Hey, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really want to get those numbers up, and we know a lot of you listen to us weekly, so please help us out and hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. Tonight, we will be recording 2 episodes. Earlier, we discussed WVU's victory over Baylor and how that will impact Neal Brown's job security. But for this episode, we will be breaking down the Texas Tech game coming up this Saturday. So let's get right into it. West Virginia takes on Texas Tech in Lubbock on Saturday at 3 o'clock. Both teams are currently 3-3, and both teams are 1-2 in Big 12 play. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out because both have a lot to play for. This is a battle between 2 explosive offenses. And one interesting storyline is Neal Brown is 0-3 against Texas Tech since becoming the head coach at West Virginia. So can Neal Brown get the monkey off his back and get one step closer to bowl eligibility? I'm excited for this game. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm excited to be playing on national television. I think it's great that the Big 12, it seems like, kind of feels like WVU brings in a good draw and is kind of embracing the teams that are going to be sticking with the Big 12 long term. Cough, cough, not Texas and Oklahoma. So, I'm always excited when we get to play against in front of a large audience, and that makes it even more important as to why WVU needs to continue the way we started in the Baylor game, and that's playing aggressive on defense, scoring points, and controlling the lines of scrimmage. And I think this is a good opportunity to do it. I think Texas Tech is a quality squad. It's tough to play in Lubbock. Neal Brown struggles against his old school, but I think this is a game WVU can win.
Yeah, I mean, I think this game will have, throwback Big 12 feels to it. 2 offenses who have the ability to score at will, 2 teams who are fighting for a bowl game. The scary thing is, though, Texas Tech has the 4th best passing game in the country and the very best passing game in the Big 12. So it's no secret. They're going to want to try to pass the ball against WVU's spotty secondary. So let's dive right into it. Texas Tech's head coach, Joey McGuire, has been hush on who's starting at quarterback. They have Tyler Shuck, Donovan Smith, and Byron Morton. All 3 Texas Tech quarterbacks are practicing this week, and that's the first time since the season opener that they've been able to say that. All 3 have also been banged up at one time or another this season. However, all 3 have started games this year, and all are capable of running that offense effectively. And I don't know. We might see some interesting things because McGuire has had some really fun quotes lately. He said he would even tease putting all 3 of them on the field at the same time if they're all healthy. So maybe be ready for some wacky calls and formations. But he also said whoever starts the game will be the starter throughout. He's not going to, bounce back and forth because he doesn't want to knock his guys out of rhythm. So I don't know. He's kind of all over the place in his quotes. We'll see what happens. But regardless, what are your thoughts on Tech's quarterback situation?
Yeah. So for my analysis, I kind of prepared more for Donovan Smith just because I feel like, his track record's been pretty good this year. I mean, he's thrown for over 1,400 yards. He does have 7 picks, which is a lot. But he also has 11 touchdowns. So, and he's more of a runner than other guys. Anyways, I mean, he's 3rd on the team in carries. He has over 190 yards rushing on the season so far. So he's capable of running. Sluck has, I think, a little bit more experience. He did play for Oregon for a little bit. So, I mean, it just seems like that kid can't catch a break because I think he was hurt last year too. So, kind of a bummer for him. But, in my mind, I feel like Donovan Smith is the guy who might give WVU more issues because he does have a little bit more mobility. But on the flip side, he is more prone to error. So I don't know if I would rather face Donovan Smith knowing that he can run the ball around on us a little bit and take advantage of, our porous second level defense, or be more hopeful that he's playing, knowing that he struggles under pressure is prone to turning the ball over.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Smith is more of a runner / passer, whereas, Shuck and Morton are, they certainly have the ability to take off if necessary. I mean, Morton even had 50 running yards against Oklahoma State, but they're more of your traditional quarterbacks. So, I think the only way West Virginia changes their approach to this game is if Smith is the starter, because Smith even leads them in rushing attempts. So they like throwing him out there even when he's not starting from, like in goal line situations to run. And I think that's the only time they would call different plays is if he's in there over the other two. But like you said, his biggest problem is turnovers. He has 7 interceptions and only 4 starts this year, even though he's seen action in just about every game.
4 fumbles too.
Yeah. So because of that, I think they're going to lean more towards Morton. I watched the game he had against Oklahoma State. In the first half, he looked like a Heisman candidate. I mean, he was shredding them. And then he got banged up right before halftime. And then in the second half, he was just a different person. So I feel like if he's healthy, and they did just have a bye week, I think they'll lean towards Morton. But who knows? I mean, it's a good problem to have, I guess, if you're the head coach. You have 3 guys fully capable of putting up numbers in your offense. But regardless, Tech always has weapons at wide receiver. We all know that. This year's no different. They don't have an elite guy, though. Like in the old days, guys like Michael Crabtree, Kiki QT comes to mind, just elite guys. And they don't really have that. I doubt any of these guys even emerge as an all Big 12 member by end of the season. However, it's a solid group. I mean, their leading receiver, Miles Price, has an ankle injury. As of this episode, we're not sure if he's playing or not. It's too early in the week for us to know. But they have plenty of other guys to rely on if he can't suit up. In fact, Tech has 9 players with 10 or more receptions. Compare that to WVU, who only has 4. So, I mean, they definitely like to throw it around. And another thing I saw is they really like to get running backs involved in the passing game too. 32 halfback receptions for Texas Tech. So it all comes down to this. How can WVU's spotty pass defense slow down this scary passing attack?
Yeah. So, kind of to build off what you were saying, 4 wide receivers over 250 yards. So that kind of even shows how much volume some of these guys are getting. And like you alluded to, number 1 in catches is Miles Price, and number 2, number 1 in targets and number 1 in yards is Duran Bradley. So I kind of focused on those 2 guys a little bit more. And what it seems like is that Texas Tech kind of has roles for guys. I mean, they have guys who kind of specialize in certain route trees and combinations, which is, I think, a smart thing to do. But, looking at Miles Price, for example, while he is second in receiving yards on the team, he's more of a yards after catch guy. He's averaging 7 yards after the catch right now, but he only has an average depth of target of 4.6 yards. So they're throwing to him underneath a lot, letting him kind of create space on his own and get some yak. And he also plays primarily in the slot, where Duran Bradley is like the complete opposite guy. He has 41 targets on the team, which is the most on the team, but he only has 24 catches. And primarily that's because they're throwing the ball downfield to him. His average depth of target is 13.7 yards downfield, which is 9 yards further downfield than what Price is getting. And he's a big dude. I mean, he plays outside. He's 6'5", 215. He leads the team in touchdowns with 3. He leads the team in contested catches with 5. So I think the secret to containing some of these weapons is kind of figuring out where Texas Tech wants to give him the ball and beating him to that point.
Yeah. And like we just discussed on the last episode, our defense loves to play, zone, which is kind of scary with a team like this. Cause like you said, they have their guys who they like to throw underneath to, and they like their guys who go over top. And so, I mean, they can really beat you several different ways. It's not a team like Baylor who likes to throw over the middle and run a lot of screens where you can kind of predict where the ball is going. And so, yeah, I mean, on paper, this is a very scary team. So it's just kind of hard to see how our secondary is going to slow it down. But I think it's just what we've been talking about for weeks. They just need to be very aggressive. And if you get beat from time to time, then you get beat. I mean, it seems like even when we're playing conservative and dropping guys back, we get beat too with these chunk plays. So I think WVU's defense just needs to maybe jump the gun a little bit. Does that mean you'll get beat by a double move here and there? Maybe, but at the same time, you might come up with a few big splash play turnovers like we saw against Baylor.
Yeah, the one thing I liked that I would like to see us steal from, some of the other Big 12 teams we played is how physical some of the secondary guys played. I think of Texas where, their secondary wasn't great going up into that game, but what really set them apart and what really gave WVU problems was how physical they were. They went up there and they put pads on players every time. They, even if they would miss tackles sometimes, it's just play physical, beat them down, make players scared. Pitt did the same thing with Bryce Ford Wheaton, even though it was maybe a little bit too an extreme with the head hunting a little bit. But still, it's a strategy you can employ. And if you have guys who aren't great in coverage and we've talked about how Texas isn't great in coverage, but they made up for it with their physicality. Can WVU be physical and get these guys off their games? That's something new that they should try. And instead of playing a little bit more passive, play aggressive, play through the ball. Try to break up some passes. And if you don't break up the passes, at least let the receiver know that you were there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. And the only thing they got to worry about with that is, giving up yards after the catch, which you just said they like doing as well. So, I mean, it's really a tricky situation. This is why we don't get paid the big bucks to come up with game plans, because a team like Texas Tech really does give you a headache trying to figure out how you can slow them down. Two guys you'll see running the ball for them is Sharodrick Thompson, who had 2 touchdowns against WVU last year, and Taj Brooks are their 2 big running backs. Thompson is a pretty good runner, and chances are that's who you'll see get the, majority of the handoffs. But obviously Tech doesn't run the ball a lot. And I think WVU will have success in slowing down the run game, even if they, do try to establish a run, because Tech just, 1, they don't focus on it. And 2, our front seven's pretty good. Tech's offensive line just has not been very good run blocking all year. Thompson has really had to fight and claw to get the yards he even has this year. My only concern is that Tech's passing game could wear down WVU's defense, and Tech will start to gash WVU's D in the second half. That's the only way I could see them having success in the run game. I could potentially see that happening. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think it'll be key for us to shut down runs and force Tech into second and third and long situations. I think that'll go a long way in WVU getting a victory on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing they can kind of key on is that Brooks and Sir Roderick Thompson are 2 different types of backs. Brooks is more of a power back. He runs mostly inside of the tackles. 71% of his carries are in between the tackles. He's a big back, 5'10", 230 pounds. He's forced 15 missed tackles, but he likes bruising up the middle, and you kind of, rely on him to have most of his carries up there. So maybe you can cheat a little bit there, while Sir Roderick Thompson is pretty explosive. He has 12 runs of more than 10 yards. He's forced 23 forced missed tackles, and 40% of his carries actually come outside of the tackles. And he's really dangerous on those carries too. He's averaging 6.3 yards per carry when he's rushing outside of the tackles, with 8 rushes of 10 yards or more. And he's also averaging 4.28 yards after contact on those outside rushes, including forcing 14 missed tackles, which is more than Taj Brooks has forced total, just running in the middle. So you can kind of cheat a little bit. I mean, they're obviously going to run those guys a little bit all over the place a little bit, but where they're most effective is something that you can kind of, guesstimate and try to figure out how you can take those guys out of the game. And I think it's going to be key, is to keep Sir Roderick Thompson inside those tackles, because while, Taj Brooks obviously is a big physical runner, he's not someone who's going to gash you for big gains and, just pounding up the middle, keeping you honest. Isn't something that's super scary. Thompson can really gash you for some big plays. So You want to keep him reined in and keep him inside of those tackles. And that's going to be on the defensive ends and linebackers to, keep contained.
Yeah, 100%. And, the biggest thing for WVU to win is how they're performing on the offense against Tech's defense. Texas Tech's defense is actually pretty good at defending the pass. They have the second best pass defense in the Big 12. They're only allowing about 220 yards per game. And they've made guys like Spencer Sanders throw for under 50% in completions. So, they've had some impressive performances thus far. So what does JT Daniels and the Mountaineer wide receivers have to do to have success against this defense?
So I think that they need to, I think something that'd be very effective against this group is to employ, double moves, things that they can't predict because, their two best corners or their two starting corners, I should say Malik Dunlap and Rashad Lewis, are guys who can break up passes. Dunlap has 7 pass breakups on the year. Williams has 6, and they don't allow their receivers to catch a lot of targets. With Dunlap allowing 40% of targets to be caught and Williams allowing 39% of his targets to be caught. But it seems like they're successful in that because they're an aggressive cornerback. That's something that we're talking about the WVU defensive backs doing more of. Because when they do allow a catch, Dunlap is allowing receivers to get 14 yards per reception, while Williams is at 21 yards per reception. So you got to take advantage of that aggressiveness and, just beat them, let them bite, let them try to anticipate, don't feed into it, just take advantage of their mistakes and beat them deep. Like you said, I think it's a good analogy to talk about how this could be like an old Big 12 football game, because if WVU secondary can't hold up and these corners are playing as aggressive as they are, this could be a very, very high scoring game if both offensive coordinators drop the right game plan.
Oh yeah. I mean, I heard what the over was for Vegas, and I think it was in the 60s. It was maybe even higher. It was something ridiculous. So everyone's predicting this to be an absolute shootout. And to me, I think an important thing to do will be to establish the run game for WVU, because for as good as Texas Tech is at defending the pass, they're not very good at defending the run. They are the second to last Big 12 team in run defense, and they're allowing 146 yards per game. So Tony, Justin, if CJ Donaldson's healthy, they all have potential to have really big days, much like we did against Baylor. So West Virginia needs to establish the run early and often. I think control the clock if you need to. Obviously, you don't want to, do things that make your offense uncomfortable. You don't want to change completely your identity, but establishing the run game and having long drives, I think that would be huge for a victory. You can make that secondary cheat up a little bit, and maybe hit some shots over the top. So I can't emphasize enough. They can't do what they did against Texas and completely ignore the run game to start, because it could be very reminiscent of Texas. They could be down early and then be forced to throw a lot, which Texas Tech would love for West Virginia to do. That'd be playing right into their hands.
Oh, for sure. And, kind of the 3 names to watch from Texas Tech on the rush defense is Kryshawn Merriweather, who's a threat in the pass rush as well. He has 12 pressures and 3 sacks, but he's also the leading tackler on the team, and he's pretty solid in run defense. Jalen Hutchings is their starting defensive tackle, who is a short, stout guy, 6 foot, 310 pounds. And another guy that, Zach Frazier is going to have to handle up there in the middle. And I think, after his practice session with Ika last week in Baylor, he should be able to make short work with Hutchings. So he doesn't worry me too much. He is their best run defender, and he is very good at kind of eating up blocks. But I think Zach Frazier really gives us a leg up there. The guy who really kind of intrigues me, I don't know if worries me is the right answer, but really intrigues me, is their starting safety, if that's what you want to call him, Marquise Waters. He is abysmal in coverage. I do want to start out by saying that he's allowed the most receptions and the most yards on the team. He's allowed 208 yards after receptions. However, he is someone who is extremely good against the run, and he plays everywhere. I was looking at where PFF has him as playing, and he will play on the outside on the defensive line. He'll play as a box safety. He'll play in the slot. He will play all over the formation. And, what that kind of strikes me of is, if you remember last year for Baylor, they had Jalen Petrie, who gave us all sorts of problems. And I'm hoping that this isn't another one of those guys who we just kind of can't account for and just wreaks havoc in our backfield, wreaks havoc on our short passing game, even though he's not a great in coverage. But hey, we've done stupider things before. So he's a guy I kind of want to highlight because he plays everywhere, and Texas Tech seems to deploy him like a Swiss Army knife. So it's going to be interesting to see how WVU accounts for him, especially in the run game, because he can be disruptive.
Yeah. And a big thing that I would like to see them do, which they did against Baylor, is utilize your tight ends. I know Mike O'Loughlin is pretty much done for the year, is what I'm hearing. But you have two tight ends who seem, they're not outstanding, but they're capable of providing extra support and maybe giving you extra help on a guy like that who can slow it down. Because once again, I think Tony and company have to have a big day if West Virginia wants any chance of keeping up with that scary Texas Tech offense, because more than likely they're going to get their points. It's just all about whether West Virginia can keep up with them or not.
Yeah. And I want to talk about tight ends real quick too, because I think it's a good topic to discuss with Mike O'Loughlin out. We saw Brian Polanday play a lot, and he has been very underwhelming so far this year. Traylon Davis can't seem to remember the snap count. He's young, but he's just not working out. And I'm interested to see how WVU kind of handles that, because you can't have someone who's a complete liability out there just to play them for the sake of being a body. And the guy I always wonder about is, I understand he's a true freshman, but Corbin Page from West Virginia, he's a big body. And he's young, but if we have to run a tight end, I would like to see him get some reps. Or should WVU kind of embrace more of the, air raid style and just spread out teams, create more running lanes up the middle, get guys out of the box by playing more four wideouts and run that way?
Yeah, once again, it's going to be interesting to see how the coaches dial up this game plan to see what's effective. But yeah, for me, I still think you establish the run. The only way those tight ends are going to get better is if they get reps, and that's who you got to roll with for the last 6 games of the year. Mike O'Loughlin's done, and that's who you got.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not saying every game that's the strategy you need to do, but against a team like Tech, who has such a glaring hole on defense in the run game, whereas they seem to shut down the pass game pretty well, I say WVU's best game so far this year is when they've established the run. So it's kind of like the perfect mixture heading into this game.
Yeah. One more thing on the defense too, I wanted to get your thoughts on is, I noticed that Texas Tech has an edge rusher named Tyree Wilson, and he seems to be kind of a freak. 31 pressures, 7 sacks on the year. WVU, we've just talked about how great they've been pass protecting, but I can't really remember any sort of guy who's put up numbers similar to this that we faced since maybe Pitt. So how do you feel like WVU is going to do at controlling Tyree Wilson?
So when I was looking at their defense, I was just, checking out stats. That's the name that kept popping off the page. And so I eventually Googled them and did a deeper dive. And pretty much everyone has them getting drafted in the NFL. So he's a legit player. Like you said, he does create a lot of pressure. And that's the guy really I think I'm most scared of on their defense. I think if anyone's going to cause havoc, it is going to be Wilson. But yeah, that I'm going to be honest, that's a guy I didn't know a lot about until today when I really started researching him. But that's definitely a guy they need to keep an eye on.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the one thing that I like is that Wyatt Milam has been playing better. I didn't look in too much as to what side Wilson prefers to line up on, but I'm really hoping that Milam can keep his streak going, because he can be prone to just games where he falls apart. He's still young, and it's tough to play guys like that. So I'm really hoping that we kind of hone in on figuring out a way to stop him and keep the running backs in on the passing game. We don't really use them anyway, so make sure you have one of the backs back there understanding that you're going to have to help chip this guy and make sure he doesn't get in JT Daniels' face.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. Another thing we wanted to discuss today, guys, was the future of the Big 12, because they had some news come out this week. So let's talk about it for a minute. The Big 12 has announced a divisionless schedule for the 2023-2024 seasons. They will have 14 teams these next 2 years, with the addition of Cincinnati, UCF, BYU, and Houston, plus Texas and Oklahoma. As of right now, will still be in the Big 12 for those 2 seasons. So, yeah, there'll be no divisions, and the top 2 teams will meet in the conference championship, which, yeah, I mean, that's what the Big 12 does now. So that's not really that different. However, everybody can't play each other in one single year because of how many teams there are. So the way they're going to do it is they will protect rivalry games. Like, for example, Texas and Oklahoma will play both seasons. Our rivalry game, our protected rivalry, will be Cincinnati due to location and our history, I'm sure. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, it's just interesting how they decided to do that. I think it's a really good idea. So what are your thoughts on what the Big 12 will look like in the 23-24 seasons?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I can see the argument for having divisions, but I do like the idea of kind of rotating through teams over years. And obviously that's going to change when Texas and Oklahoma leave. But, I like the ability of kind of cycling through all the opponents over a 2-year period or so. I think that makes the conference feel more relatable, and I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but to fans, it makes them feel like, they're all part of the same conference, as opposed to when you're playing in like the SEC, you're only playing like the same 5 or 6 teams every year. And you might see the schools from the other division maybe once every 3 or 4 years. It kind of depersonalizes the feeling of that conference. So I think it's a really unique approach, and I kind of like it. I'm interested to see how it works out. I love that we have Cincinnati as our rival. It's good to know that we're going to have at least one short road trip every 2 years. I do think that the long road trips does take a toll on the team. And that's something that people probably don't talk about enough. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the new Big 12. I know we've mentioned it a lot. It kind of feels like the old Big East, where, you have these guys who've been around a while, you have the new bloods, and every school seems like they're trending in the right direction. I mean, I don't think there's a school in the conference right now, or is coming into the conference right now, that I can look at and say, well, that team doesn't kind of match up with our talent level, because all 4 teams coming in are pretty solid, and all 10 teams currently in the Big 12 are pretty solid too. So it's going to be interesting. It might hurt our chances at our, as in Big Virginia, but chances at a college football spot, because we might all just beat up on each other. But it's going to be fun football to watch for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Big 12 this year is so good top to bottom. We only have one team with a losing record, and that's Iowa State, who's just 3-4. They're just one game short of being 500 or above. So there's lots of parity, and I'm with you. I think with the addition of those 4 teams, it's just going to create more parity, because those are all good schools. And I love the no divisions. I think it's a good thing, because look at the ACC or the Big Ten. 3 or 4 of their best teams are all in one division. And so I like how the Big 12 does it, where, you just take the 2 best teams, period, stick them in the conference championship. And I feel like you get more of the right representation from your conference doing that. And it looks like that's what the Big 12 will do the next couple years with their 14 teams. We'll see what they do once they have 12. But I don't know. I mean, everyone's so high on the SEC and the Big Ten, and they certainly have good schools. But I think the Big 12 is the most fun team to watch so far this season. Like we just talked about, just every team's a quality opponent. It seems like every game is pretty close. You don't see a ton of blowouts. So yeah, I mean, I just love the way the Big 12 is trending.
Yeah, I mean, it's the way college football should be, really. I mean, having an Alabama or an Ohio State who's blowing out, whoever they're playing, 5 out of the 12 weeks of the season. And 3 of those games are conference opponents. I mean, that's just not fun. And that's not, I mean, you can tell they're a step above. And I'm not saying that juggernaut shouldn't exist, because if you're winning, you should be able to continue to build your program. But, I think there's a lot of value in having a conference like the Big 12 where everyone's kind of the same size. And that's going to just create even more parity whenever Texas and Oklahoma leave, because then you don't have those juggernauts who just have millions and millions of dollars in their war chest to kind of pump into, these and NIL and all these other things. You've got a whole bunch of schools that are around the same size, geographically, and, culture wise, they're not too different. So, fans can kind of get along and understand a little bit more. And every team has a little bit of an underdog feeling. And again, it kind of harkens back to the way the old Big East was, where, you didn't really have that big marquee team, but you had 5 or 6 teams that were just fun to watch every week. And, after a few years, the media kind of caught on that the Big East was fun to watch, and, tune in on Thursdays, and then you also get more recognition in the polls. So while I think a lot of people are selling the Big 12 in terms of how they're going to fare in the new college football whenever Texas and Oklahoma leave, I think there's a big hole that the Big 12 teams can kind of grow into by showing that not only do we draw fans, but we also play the most fun and exciting brand of football.
I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be attractive to, other teams who are kind of on the outside looking in. Like, look at some of the Pac-12 teams right now. So I'm with you. And let's just, recap what happened over the weekend in the Big 12, other than the WVU Baylor game. Oklahoma defeats Kansas 52-42. With the absence of Jalen Daniels, Kansas has kind of hit a wall. They've dropped 2 straight games, and their bad defense is getting exposed because, I mean, their defense hasn't really played well all year, and they no longer have Daniels to cover up that deficiency. So, I will give Bean, the backup quarterback, his props. He's not a bad quarterback. He's actually put up some good stats. His only knock is he's not Jalen Daniels, who is just such a special athlete and can single-handedly win you a game. So what do you make of Oklahoma bouncing back? And of course, the big reason why was because they had Dylan Gabriel. But what do you make of their bounce back and Kansas kind of faltering a little bit?
It was interesting to see how well Oklahoma bounced back after that drubbing by Texas. For Kansas, I think Jalen Daniels is just such a difference maker. And such a big loss. I think you have Jalen Daniels in that game, you probably come out with a win. Because, I think he also can control the offense a little bit better with the way he runs the ball. I know Bean's mobile too, but Jalen Daniels is just different. His arm's better. He has a cannon for an arm. He can be accurate. So, I mean, for Oklahoma, I don't know what to think of them, because Texas defense isn't all world. They're not good enough to shut you out. And I understand Dylan Gabriel was out, but to be shut out, not a good look. And putting up a lot of points against Kansas really doesn't tell you much either, because Kansas defense isn't very good. So Oklahoma is still a confusing team. I'm sure that a lot of big media members will go out there and jump back on the Oklahoma bandwagon and say they're back. Texas is just elite. And, one more win and we're going to give Oklahoma some votes, even though they probably don't deserve it right now. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I feel. And the one thing that I thought was interesting is, did you realize that Jalen Daniels is only 19 years old?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did.
So
I remember them talking about it a lot last year, about why that was such a big reason to redshirt him, because he was so young. And I mean, it's amazing. The dude's just so talented. It'll be interesting to see what he does at the end of the season, because of course the report came out that he's done for the year, and then he's refuting it. which I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. I'm sure it's a pretty big injury that he has, but maybe he can come back for a game or two at the end of the year. Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see if he decides to stay at Kansas, if he decides to go to a bigger name school. Who knows?
No, he's also, I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so he's draft eligible too if you wanted to test the waters.
Oh, really? Can he leave after this year?
I believe so. I think he's a third year player, so I'm pretty sure. I think he enrolled in college when he was 17.
Because I know they talked about redshirting him last year. Like they were debating whether they were going to let him play in the WVU game last year. I do remember that.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's a redshirt sophomore, so he could go. I know I've seen several people talk about him potentially entering, so I think he is eligible if he wants to go. Now, him only playing 4 or 5 games, should he? I don't know, but I mean, also going into the draft at 19 or 20 years old, I'm sure. I mean, look at what happened with Trey Lance. I mean, he only had a small sample size of games, and he was young and showed a lot of talent. He went number 2 or number 3 overall just based on workouts. So who knows what could happen with Jalen Daniels? I mean, he could go undrafted or he could be a top 10 pick.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Circling back to Oklahoma, though, I mean, a lot of people might think, Oklahoma's on the rise again, but let's not forget their defense gave up 42 points. So, I'm with you. I really don't know what to make of them. A lot of people are saying, that's a game WVU can really win this year. And without a doubt, I think, that'll be a competitive game. But, they got a lot of problems on defense. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform over the next few weeks before that Mountaineer Oklahoma game.
Yeah, yeah. And to kind of get ahead of it too, unless Oklahoma rips off goes on an undefeated streak until from now until they play WVU. If WVU would upset Oklahoma, whether it would be an upset or not, that would not still, in my opinion, be a marquee win for Neil Brown. Just want to get ahead of the rage in case we do get that win.
Yeah, you're looking way down the road for that one. Let's talk about Texas defeats Iowa State 24-21. This is a game Iowa State just let get away. They had an opportunity to win it at the end, but Xavier Hutchinson dropped a key pass in the red zone. It was like right around the 10-yard line, I think. If he would have stayed on his feet, he might have been able to just walk in with it and take the lead. But also, I think Texas got a little home cooking. Iowa State was penalized on a roughing the passer call earlier in the game that erased an interception. So it was a huge play. And in my opinion, it wasn't a great call, but whatever. That's a call that you see all the time now in football. However, they weren't consistent because on Iowa State's final drive, Decker Hunter gets clobbered in the helmet and fumbles, and Texas recovers. Nothing's called, and that's pretty much game over. In my opinion, you can't call one of those penalties and greatly affect the game and then just swallow your whistle on the final drive when it was clearly a targeting call. But whatever. I mean, Iowa State had their opportunities. They could have won regardless. They just didn't capitalize on them. And they are now 0-4 in the Big 12. And they sit at the bottom all by themselves now because Oklahoma won.
Yeah, I feel bad for Iowa State. Every game they've lost has been super close, and this was a game that they probably should have won, like you said. I mean, at the very least, they should have had a few more shots at the end zone or at least a field goal after that targeting call because that's what it should have been. And it kind of looking, stepping back a little bit too. It's interesting for Matt Campbell. I don't think anyone's thinking less of him. I still think he's a very good head coach, and people think that he's a good head coach. But I mean, think of the job offers he was getting 2 or 3 years ago, I should say. In the situation he's dealing with now. And that's not to say he's not enjoying the rebuild. He might like that part of the job. But I mean, it can't be easy losing all these close games and losing that way to Texas. Whenever, a year or two at like Notre Dame or some other really big school making a lot of money. So just kind of goes to show you that, I think Matt Campbell's going to turn it around this year. Definitely isn't the year, but yeah, I mean, it's just tough for Iowa State right now. They're so close, and it seems like their defense is top notch. They might have, let me just think about it for a second. They might have the best defense in the Big 12. Do you think that's right? I mean, it seems like they're always holding teams down.
I don't have it in front of me, but if I had to guess, yeah, because I mean they slowed down that explosive Texas offense to just 24 points. If
Kansas.
we're talking about their overall, um, games contributing to that, not just conference play, they played Iowa at one point this year, and we all know how dreadful they are on offense. So I'm sure that's really going to pad your stats. So yeah, if I had to guess, they're probably the number one defense in the Big 12.
Yeah, and that's tough to lose games whenever you're holding teams that, below point levels that they're not used to scoring. I mean, it just kind of goes to show you how far losing Brees Hall and all that offensive talent set them back. Brock Purdy. So they'll be back, but they're also not an easy win for WVU coming up either, because that defense, I mean, could really pose problems for us. And with how bad our secondary is, I mean, who's to say that Hunter to Xavier Hutchings thing couldn't just absolutely torch us and put 30 points on the board against us.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are acting like that game's a slam dunk win on WVU's schedule. And without a doubt, I mean, if you're looking at who they have left, that's definitely one that you want WVU to win. But that's a road game. That's probably one of the toughest defenses you'll play all year. So by no means is that just a layup for the Mountaineers. That's for sure. And then we have one more game to get to. TCU defeats Oklahoma State in an exciting 43-40 overtime win. Unfortunately, I missed this game. I really wanted to see it, but I wasn't home. I watched the highlights. It looked like it lived up to the hype. This moves TCU to 6-0, and they are the only undefeated team left in the Big 12. They are tied with Kansas State with 3-0 in Big 12 play. But yeah, I mean, they're the only team who hasn't lost all year. So it really put TCU in the driver's seat.
Yeah, stunning. I didn't catch the game either, but I made sure to read through the comment threads from the game thread on Reddit. And it definitely seemed like Oklahoma State fans were really kind of pissed at Gundy for taking the foot off the gas in the second half. Because at one point, I know Texas Tech was up, or not Texas Tech, Oklahoma State was up by multiple scores, and TCU just came right back. And it's amazing this second life that Sonny Dykes has had as a Power 5 head football coach, because he did good at a smaller school, but he did so bad at Cal, and now he's turned this TCU program around really, really quick. I mean, I thought this team would probably be worse than Iowa State, and they are nowhere close to that. I mean, are they going to go undefeated? I don't think so, but I mean, I think offense wise, they can definitely score with the best of them. And somehow, some way, their defense has been able to stop teams from scoring more points than them. So really exciting football team, and kind of out of nowhere. If someone had TCU winning the Big 12 at the beginning of the season, I would have called them a liar to their face.
I'm with you. I mean, last year, TCU, of course, they had a lot of talent, but I mean, they were one of the worst teams in the Big 12 last year. Their defense couldn't stop anybody. Their offense wasn't consistent enough. And now all of a sudden they make one head coaching change, come back with almost the same talent, and they're 6-0 just like that. They even lost their best running back into the portal, who I believe he went to Ole Miss. So it's impressive what they're doing over there. Do I think they'll, go undefeated? I don't. Their defense still gives up a lot of points. They're winning close games. I think eventually that'll catch up with them because they barely beat Kansas. I think that was just a week ago, and then they had this close one against Oklahoma State. But I definitely think they will be in the top 3 at the end of the year, and so more than likely they will head to the conference championship. So it is impressive what they're doing over there, and it definitely makes me excited for WVU's next home game. I know we've already mentioned it, but hopefully WVU can pull off a road win in Lubbock and be coming back to Morgantown on a roll against more than likely highly ranked TCU team. So we'll see.
Does TCU play this week, or are they on a bye?
That's a really good question. Let me pull that up real quick.
I would love for them to come
They
in.
play Kansas State, so that's wow.
Oh, no.
That's back-to-back weeks. Really huge games for them because Oklahoma State and TCU were the only undefeated teams heading into that game. And now TCU and Kansas State are the only 2 3-0 Big 12 teams. So hey, I mean, that could work in our favor because maybe they come off 2 huge, highly emotional games and then they come to Morgantown and we sneak up on them. We'll see.
And that's really good too for us because TCU is a home game for us, and so is Kansas State. And if those are going to be the top 2 teams coming in, I mean, Oklahoma State's still up there. They're going to be hanging around, and that's an away game. But that's still too, me
Texas
selfishly
State.
as a fan, am looking forward to those games.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I love the schedule this year. But yeah, I mean that's all I got for the podcast tonight. You got anything else?
No, that was it.
All right. Yeah. Once again, guys, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really want to pump those numbers up. And we know a lot of you listen to us weekly. So do us a favor and just hit subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. And as always, thanks for listening, guys. We love doing this and we're happy that you guys tune in. So we'll catch you next week.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.